But I bet you I don't know that.
Okay, let's talk about chapter 13. Go ahead and get your slides out for chapter 13. Now I'm going to tell you, this is primarily a math chapter, but I want you to listen closely about this math. If you don't get it, and many of you won't, quite honestly, that's okay. There's a very low likelihood of you getting much, if any, math from this chapter on the test. What you need to get from this chapter, much more than the math, is the terminology. We're going to go through the math, but I want you to focus on the terminology in this chapter more so than anything. You need to know the terms, because if you know the terms in the math, you have a much higher likelihood of getting the math. Marlo, Michelle.
Yeah.
The last thing you need to be doing is focusing on something other than me.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Chapter 13. I understand you're working on something, but let's get zoned in. Okay? Chapter 13. So the first idea in this chapter, this is all about investment math. Investors think about things differently than homeowners do. Investors don't care what they pay for a property. They don't care how much it costs. They don't care if it costs $10, $10,000, or $10 million. What they care about is how much of a return they get on their investment. Does that make sense for everybody? They're happy to invest $10 million if they can get a great return on that $10 million. The other thing they look at, quite frankly, is not the purchase price, but the down payment. Their investment is not the purchase price, because the loan doesn't matter. It's fake money to them. It wasn't their money to begin with. They're not going to make the mortgage payment. Who's ultimately making the mortgage payment on an investment property? The tenants are. So the owner of the property does not care about the borrowed money. It's fake money in and fake money out at the end. What they care about is the down payment, because that comes from where? From their pocket. So when you talk about a return on investment for an investor, you're not talking about how much of a return they make on the purchase price. You're talking about how much of a return they made on the what? On the down payment.
That's where the return on investment comes from, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
When you talk about return on investment, you're talking about the return on the down payment, because their investment is the down payment. It's not the purchase price of the property. The only real investment they actually have in the property is their down payment. Everybody okay with that idea? All right. It's a different way to think about things. Very different. But for them, the loan is fake money, because it's not theirs in the beginning. They don't make a mortgage payment in the middle, because the property makes its own mortgage payments. And then if they finally do sell the property, what do they do with it? They pay off the note, right? So it's fake money in and fake money out. They never saw it. But what they do care about is how much money they took out of their pocket and how much money they put back into their pocket. Does that make sense for everybody? That is investment math, essentially. And that's the biggest thing to understand it. Now, when we talk about ROI, or return on investment, what we're really talking about is how much does that investor make as a percentage of their investment on an annual basis. ROI, return on investment, is an annual number. It's an annual percentage number. What would you say is a good return on your investment? I mean, what would you guys like to have as a return on your investment? 100%? Well, you're not going to get that annually. At least not in one of these things, anyway. 25, 30%? You have very lofty goals. We're talking annually. 10 annually.
10 to 12 would be good.
10 would be fantastic. A nicely performing commercial property might get you an 8 to 10 to 12% annual return on investment. If it was a 25% return, folks, nobody would ever buy stocks. What would they invest all their money in? Commercial real estate. Okay? These are investment vehicles. People don't buy property because they want to own property. They buy property because they want to make what? They want to make money. They're looking at that annual return on their investment. As a matter of fact, you already know what that annual return on their investment is called. You just learned a formula for it. Before tax, cash flow. Their annual return on their investment is the before tax cash flow, because that's the amount of money they put back into their pocket every single year. Does that make sense for everybody? So they put the before tax cash flow back into, we also call this cash on cash. It's a cash on cash return, because it's the cash they get back from the cash they invested, which was their what? Their down payment. So when you talk about return on investment, what you're really talking about is what percentage is the cash flow of the down payment. That's what return on investment is. Is everybody kind of following that mindset? That's the investor's mindset. So when we talk about return, we also use the word profit. They generally mean the same thing, except most of the time on a test question, if they say return, they're talking about the annual number. What's the annual return on investment? Whereas if they say profit, when do you realize a profit or a loss? When you do what? When you sell it. When you sell it. So when they say profit, they're generally referring to how much profit did they make from the time they bought it till the time they what? Sold it. Whereas if they say return, they're talking about the annual number. Is everybody okay with that? All right? So again, it's more about terminology than anything. Now here's the math formula. And it's the same formula whether you're doing an annual return or whether you're doing a profit and loss. It's a T-bar. And on the top of the T-bar is the dollars that you're making. Whether that's annual or when you sell, the number of dollars you make goes on the top. Does that make sense for everybody? So if my before tax cash flow is $120,000, where would I put that in this formula? On the top, because my return is my before tax cash flow. Does that make sense for everybody? And what would my original investment be? My down payment. So if I know my before tax cash flow and I divide it by my down payment, can I not get my annual rate of return?
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. So here's an example. It says Daryl purchases an apartment complex which has an annual before tax cash flow of $127,500. He's purchasing the property for $15 million, but he's borrowing $13,500,000 of that. Based on this information, what is Daryl's return on investment, or his rate of return on the investment? Well, his rate of return is going to be his dollar return, his cash flow, divided by his what? His down payment. So what is his cash flow? That's what's going on top. That's what? 127.5. We don't have to do any math for that. They gave us that. But what about his original investment? They didn't tell us what his down payment was, but they did tell us what we need to know to get there, didn't they? Couldn't we subtract the two? Couldn't we say, well, he paid $15 million and he borrowed $13.5 to figure out his down payment? What is his down payment here? $1,500,000. $1.5 million is his down payment. So the math would be $127,500 divided by $1,500,000, and that equals 0.085. Well, that's a rate. Anytime we're calculating a rate, what do we have to do with our final answer? Multiply by 100, and so that's an 8.5% annual return on that property. It's not bad. So another way to look at that is he invested $1.5 million, and he's getting back how much every year? $127,500.
So if so you say probably in about 10 years, if you don't got every bit that he put in,
Pretty much.
Keep it longer, he just freely clear.
There you go. And he still owns the property.
He's still on the property.
Correct. And it's increased in value. And he's paid the mortgage down because somebody else has been making the mortgage payment.
Okay.
Starts to look real good after a while, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is everybody understanding this basic formula here? Okay. It really doesn't get more complex than that. It's just about knowing the verbiage, knowing that the original investment is the down payment. Now, if they pay cash, how much is the original investment?
Whatever the cash is.
It's the full purchase price, right? If they pay cash. Okay? You need to know this word, Equity. It is a word that is going to be used on the exam several times, and it is a word that people really struggle with defining for whatever reason. I've tried to give you a visual image to help with that. Equity is the opposite of what? Of debt. If you think about ownership of a property, as your debt goes up, your equity goes what? Down. And as your equity goes up, your debt goes down. So paying your debt down would increase your what? Equity. Does that make sense? So here's the way I define equity, and here's what I've learned about this. You're going to have to come up with your own definition because you really need to understand this word. And for whatever reason, people struggle about this word. Equity is, for me, it's the difference between what the property's worth and what I owe. The way I think of equity is if I sold this property today and paid off the loans, how much money would I have left over? That's my equity. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay? If I sold it today and paid off all the loans, the money left over is my equity. Are you with me on that definition? Good. So what are ways that you could increase your equity?
Pay it off faster.
Pay it down, pay the debt down.
Sometimes you can do improvements. You put 10,000 in, and that improvement's worth 20,000.
Even if it's only worth 10, you still improved your equity, didn't you?
Yeah.
As long as you didn't add to the debt. If you added value to the property in any way, and you didn't add to the debt, what have you added to? Your equity.
Also time, as she said, it's gonna build,
Naturally pay down, and appreciation. We call that appreciation. The property goes up in value over time. You guys just identified the 3 things that would show up on a test as affecting equity. On a test, they would want to know what are the 3 ways that you could increase equity in a property. So what were they again? Paying down the debt.
Appreciation.
Appreciation or market value going up. And doing what?
Adding to the property.
Improvements to the property. Those are the 3 ways that we could increase equity in a property. Now, could our equity decrease?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Market goes down. Would that decrease our equity?
Yes.
Sure. If we borrow more money, like if we open a home equity line and borrow more money, would that lower our equity?
Yes.
It sure would. Absolutely.
Any damages to the property.
If we damage the property and devalue it in any way, because if you lower the value of the property but the debt level stays the same, that comes straight out of the equity. Are we all good on that word? Because you're going to see it for sure. Now, as we said, profit is not an annual number, generally speaking. We don't talk about annual profits, we talk about annual returns. We talk about profit usually when we're selling the property. How much money did we make? Here's the thing though, we still care about the original investment. The loan is still fake money. Because, here's what I mean by that. Let me ask you a question. Let's say that Alice is buying an investment property. And that property is priced at $100,000 when she purchases it. Now she has $100,000 cash. She's got it. She can pay cash for that property. Is everybody with me on that? Okay? So let's say in one scenario she pays $100,000 cash. In a different scenario she pays $20,000 in cash and the other $80,000 with a what? With a loan, some type of financing. She's still paying $100,000 for the property. Does that make sense for everybody? So she got $20,000 down. Over here she pays $100,000 cash. When she sells the property, no matter which scenario she goes in, she's going to sell the property. She sells it several years later for $120,000. Is everybody with me? Okay, so let me ask you a question. How much money did she make on this side? $20,000. She bought it for $100,000. She sold it for $120,000. She made $20,000. Correct? How much money did she make on this side? It's still $20,000. How much money did she have to invest over here to make that $20,000? How much money did she have to invest over here to make that $20,000? Would you rather double your money or get a 20% return? Which would you rather do? You'd rather double your money, right? And that's why investors don't care about what they pay for the property, because when they look at how much profit they made, that investor is not going to look at it. This investor that paid $100,000 and sold it for $120,000 is not going to say they made a 20% profit. They're going to say they made 100% profit, because how much did they invest? 20. And how much did they make? 20. That's 100% profit. That's doubling your money. You see what I mean? And so what matters here is the down payment, the investment, not the purchase price. It's a whole different way of thinking of things.
But that let the small guy in with it without having a big down payment. You know?
It does. Or, if Alice was smart, she would find 5 of these to buy.
Yeah, if you got the credit. Yeah.
If she's got the $100,000, if she finds 5 of these to buy, and then 5 years later she sells each one of them for $120,000, she's doubled the whole $100,000.
Oh, $100,000.
Would that be the better way to go?
Yes.
By the way, you're going to get this terminology here in just a second. This is called leverage. This is the power of borrowing to get a better return. Anytime you borrow money and you get a better return because you borrowed money, that's called leverage. Because what does a lever do? A lever helps you put a little bit of input in and lift a big weight on the other side, right? You get dramatic results with a lever. So leverage is invest a little bit of money but get a big result. That's leverage. Yes, ma'am?
But she doesn't necessarily have to wait for 5 years, especially in this market as of right now. That could be in a flipping.
Right, whenever she sells. Whenever she sells. It could be quick. It could be quick. Okay? So when we talk about profit, we use the exact same formula that we did for return. The difference is going to be, when we're talking about profit, we're not talking about a before-tax cash flow. We're just talking about how much I bought it for and how much I what? And how much I sold it for. The difference between the two. Now, let me point out something to you. You're not in this first grade. You are not going to always take the big number and subtract the little number. When you are calculating somebody's profit on something, it is always what they sold it for minus what they paid for it. Could that be a negative number?
Yes.
We call that a what? That's a loss. Don't flip it around and just do big number minus little number. It's always what you sold it for minus what you paid for it. Is everybody okay with that? If it's a negative number, so be it. It's a loss. Because if you sold it for less than you paid for it, isn't that a loss? Okay? Don't flip it around and do it the other way. Okay? So, same formula goes there. And as I said, leverage is just the power of borrowing money. And that's it for the slides in this chapter. So take out that workbook, worksheet, and let's look at a few of these. I wasn't going to do this tonight, but Alice said y'all had not had enough math, so.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
All right, let's look at number 1A here, and then I'll let you guys do B and C by yourself. Okay? 1A. What is the profit or loss on the following sales? And they're talking about, now we'll just do these together real quickly. They just want to know what the dollar profit or loss. They're not asking for the percent or the rate. So what are we going to do here? Always what we sold it for minus what we paid for it. So on this one, we just got 225 minus 175, and it's a positive number, so it's a what? Profit. $50,000 profit. And then on B, we sold it for $142,500. We paid $108,700. I have to use a calculator with that one. Looks like $33,800 to me. Does that sound about right? So that's a $33,800 profit because it's a positive number. And then on C, purchased it for $418, sold it for $398. So that's going to be $398 minus $418.
That's not pretty.
That's ugly. Going the wrong way. That looks like a $20,000 loss to me. Does that make sense for everybody? $20,000 loss. Now number 2 wants us to take those same numbers and convert them into a percent profit or rate of profit. Does that make sense? So here's your formula for rate of profit. As a T-bar, on the top, you've got the dollar return or profit. And on the bottom, what do we have? The investment and the what? And the rate of return. What are they asking us for here? What are they asking us to calculate? They want to know the rate. What is the percent profit? A percent is a rate. They want to know the rate of return. So the math is always going to be the dollar profit divided by the what? Divided by the investment. And since there are no loans here, those are going to be just the purchase prices. Does that make sense? So on the first one, on A, what was our dollar profit? $50,000? Okay, so if I set my T-bar up, $50,000 goes on the top. And on the bottom, what was my original investment? $175,000. So 50,000 divided by 175,000, and that's 0.2857. That's a rate. So when we calculate the rate, what do we always need to do? Multiply by 100. So that's a 28.57% profit. Does that make sense for everybody? All right, I want you to do the other two real quickly. Unless you do a lot around me, you should be fine. These numbers look familiar? 31.09% profit on the, well, the first one is 28.57% profit. The second one is 31.09% profit. And then the last one is a 4.78% loss. The thing you have to be careful with on the last one is to make sure to know which number is the original investment. The original investment is what you paid for it, right? And what we paid for it was the $418,000. We all okay with those? No? What are you not okay with? Where did we get the $20,000 from?
The negative.
That was the $20,000 loss in C. We were just bringing them down from the ones up there. Sure. Well, first of all, you can just pretend you see a negative sign in front of it. And if you put a negative sign in there, then it's going to be a negative answer, right? But you can also do that. Your calculator has a plus minus button on it. So type in $20,000 and then hit that plus minus button. There you go. Yeah. Yes.
So would you see negative 4.78%?
No. The negative is understood with the word what? Loss. That's why it says loss. Now, if you didn't write the word loss, do you need to put the negative sign?
Yes.
Yes. But that's not the way it's going to show up on the exam. The exam is going to say 4.78% profit, 4.78% loss. They want you to choose. They want you to recognize that a negative number is a what? Is a loss.
And I didn't put my profits on my words there. I just put the percent.
Right. So what? 38% what? Is it 38% profit? Is it 38% loss? Okay. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. All right, look at number 3. Number 3 says a commercial property generates an annual before-tax cash flow of $72,500. The owner of the property purchased the development several years prior for $750,000 cash. Based on this information, what's the annual rate of return on equity investment for the property? Equity investment, that's just down payment, folks. It's a fancy way of saying that, because your equity when you buy it is what? It's your down payment, right? So they want to know, what is the annual rate of return on my investment? Well, that's what annual rate of return always is. What does that formula look like? Same thing, right? What goes on the top? The return, which is going to be the what? The cash flow, right? So before tax cash flow. And down here on the bottom, it's going to be the investment and the rate, which is what we're figuring. We want to know the rate. They want to know what is the annual rate of return. So the math is going to be before tax cash flow divided by the investment. So here's what your T-bar looks like when you set it up. Before tax cash flow on top, $72,500. And then on the bottom, our investment is $750,000. If we do that, 72,000 divided by 750, I get 0.096 times what? Times 100, because it's a rate, which is a 9.6% profit or return.
So if I put 9.66, is that a profit?
No, because they're most likely going to ask you to round it to the nearest percentage anyway. They're probably going to say a 10% return or a 9.7% return. They're going to make sure. One of the things they're really good about on the test is making sure they ask you to round the final answer to a number that no matter which way you went about it, everybody's going to end up at the same number.
Okay.
Don't stress about being, a few cents off or $1 off or point this off. It's all going to come out the same in the wash.
Okay.
Okay? We feel pretty good about that? Quite honestly, if you can understand that question, you really have 2/3 of the math whipped in this chapter. Now, the questions do get more complex, but the likelihood of you getting one of the more complex ones really goes down. So that's what I'm trying to make you hear, that if you can do this question, you're pretty dang good with this chapter. Does that make sense with everybody? Now, it can be a little bit more complex because we haven't added a loan into the picture yet. How would a loan change the picture? The investment piece would change. The investment piece would stop being the whole purchase price, and it would be our what?
Money put in.
Our down payment, the money we actually put in. Okay? And I imagine that's probably what we got in number 4. Look at number 4. It says an apartment complex was purchased in 2010 for a total sales price of $1,750,000, with the purchaser making a down payment of $200,000 and financing the remainder of the sales price paid with a mortgage note. The property operates with the following characteristics. And then we finally go down to the question. Based on this information, what is the annual rate of return on equity for the owner of the property? Well, I'm just going to write the T-bar down to remind you. Rate of return on equity has got what on top? The before tax cash flow. And then what's on the bottom? The investment and then the rate. And they want to know the rate. So what 2 numbers do we need? We need before tax cash flow, and we need the what? The investment. Well, do we already know the investment? Yeah, we know it's the purchase price of $1,750,000. Oh, I'm sorry, I actually gave it the down payment, didn't I? Sorry. It's $200,000. So we're halfway there. What number do we not know? Can you figure out the before tax cash flow?
Yes.
So here's what I would like you all to do. Your challenge, should you choose to accept it. I want you to answer this question, and I want to see it before you leave. When I see it, you're free to go. Okay? Make sure for your homework, you complete both of these math worksheets and the quiz that I gave you last night on chapters 11 and 12. Okay? All right. I'll be right back. Did you look at it already? I haven't done it. Bring it, just bring it.
I didn't notice you did this quiz already.
I did it for last night,
I
yeah.
didn't notice all the
I was
papers.
ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Gave it out last night.
Awesome.
See you guys on Monday.